And so, like, if you're on a first date and you're like, hey, let's talk boundaries with other dudes, like, probably not gonna fly right. You know what I mean? And so I would say when you step into that seriousness is where you start to bring those things up.
I'm done. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just because I mean I feel like if you're desperate to be in a serious relationship, it's easy to get over into that kind of stuff too early. At least it was for me. And like you gotta let it be fun.
Oh, that's great. Dad flowed last week. That was awesome.
Did it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't. I listened to probably the first 10 minutes of it. I haven't got to finish it yet.
Well, I was gonna say when we did it, he just flowed so easy. Like I mean, literally, I jumped up here like we just did. There was no like, oh, okay, well, how are we gonna start this? And it just boom, just went. Mm-hmm. Except for that, like obviously, I was like Facebook.
Right, the stuff in the beginning.
Yeah, I can't believe they did it again.
I know, it's
crazy. They ended up approving it after I challenged it, but
they did.
Yeah,
that one, but the last one they wouldn't with us, right?
Right. Yeah, for some reason that one was just no sirree, can't do it. I was so mad about that. I was like, that was a good one,
too. The
one
with you and your dad was something. It was because it was something specific, right? Are you stressed? It was like the way it worded it was like something that you asked specifically about a person, like do you have cancer? Is like some of the examples that they gave.
It also put on there like what was the other thing it said? Like don't let a cold get you down.
Yeah,
it's like what?
Like, I guess it's wrong to assume that somebody might have a cold somewhere.
Said invading privacy. I'm like, okay. If you're not aware, we're talking about Facebook accusing us of doing things we're not doing.
Yeah.
So you think, maybe YouTube or somebody would also catch on. It's just Facebook.
Yeah, it's interesting.
I don't know. Maybe they don't want to hear positive Christian values and things you can take away and change your life.
Yeah, it's just like such a simple question. It wouldn't even like cross my mind that would be an invasion of privacy. Like,
that's what I'm saying. Are you busy all the time, or are you stressed?
Are you too
it's
busy?
Like, whoa, you're assuming way too much. Yeah, you better back off.
Back it up.
Well, anyways, welcome to the #1 Christian podcast and helping you live life to the full. Go ahead. First things first, hit the subscribe button, like the page, all this other stuff. We just hit 200. Mm-hmm. One thing I want to bring up too, I think this might be, if I'm understanding correctly, the last episode we do in here.
Yeah, studio space.
Switching again, so it's exciting because eventually we're going to find the place where we lock down. I think that might be where the next location is because I have a lot of ability, more or less, to kind of really do whatever I want to do to it. Make it into an actual studio type of thing for that purpose. So that'll be fun.
Lighting and all that kind of stuff too.
I'm super excited for that.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of things going on now. I feel like there's this new store opening up. What is it? Sweet and Savory Blessings.
Yeah, downtown Carrollton.
Yep. I think if that's not, that's going to be really soon. I feel like
it's looking like the first couple weeks of December probably is when they'll open, and I think they'll do like a soft opening, grand opening kind of deal.
Right.
But gonna be like soups and sandwiches and all kinds of good food, basically, and a coffee shop in there as well. And if I remember correctly, it's like early or late morning through like early evening is how to run, and then they'll be open a little bit later, like Friday, that kind of thing, to do more like dinner type stuff.
Well, I love Kathy to death, and she's just going to do such an excellent job with that it's just, I'm astounded, super ready for it. It's definitely something I'm obviously promoting. She doesn't know I just did that, but I believe in her vision. I've tasted her food before too, so.
Yeah, she's an incredible cook.
Yeah.
I mean, so many, I forget how many years that she worked for Kroger and like went around and opened up the bakeries at the new Kroger's stores that they opened. And then has always done like cooking and catering stuff on the side. And both of them are retired and then just jumped into a full-time job and owning a business. So definitely going to be busy for them coming up, but they'll do a great job.
Well, it's been in the works for a while too, so I know they're like making sure it's perfect before it comes out too. So that's super exciting.
Yeah, and it'll be downtown, on Main Street there, so around where the courthouse.
It was right there where the News Democrat used to be, right?
Yeah, I believe that is the storefront. It's either that one or the one right beside it, but then like where Maguana's Flowers and Artful Gifts and all those places downtown. Just another business to kind of help revitalize downtown Carrollton, which I think is awesome to be able to bring that type of environment in there. I know they're going to have TV for all the games UK and all the games that come on
sweet.
and things like that for people to be able to watch. And so just something that's, I think, really needed downtown. There's been a lot of restaurants come and go down there, but currently there's a few, but Welch's is like a staple and stuff, obviously, but this is going to be a different type, especially with the coffee shop element.
I think it's going to be a little different, and I think that it's good for Carrollton, especially in today's environment. More people are all about their coffee. So
we're all coffee snobs now, so
either that or energy drinks. I recommend just black coffee because it won't kill you as fast, at least if you just drink it in normal rations. I mean, you could chug a lot a day, but
but I think it would take a lot to have the effects of some of these energy drinks that are out there for sure.
I had enough this past weekend. I'm telling you, my diet was wrecked.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got to stay awake. Anyways, kind of just to get on topic, I feel like we're actually going to talk about relationships today. This is kind of like the carryover from Soul Ties, how to get over them. But really, I think that another big area that people could focus on, or at least improve at, is in relationships. And I'll tell you firsthand right now, I have not succeeded all the way through up to that point yet. So there are basically going to be things I share that you don't do. And then Cody obviously is in a successful marriage, so he's got it right. And he might
sometimes,
right.
Some days.
He got, it's a numbers game. Eventually, you pretty much got to get it right. I'm just kidding. But so I mean, let's go ahead. Let's just roll into it. I guess one of the first questions I'll ask is, when you think of a successful relationship. So this can be anything from dating, whatever, into marriage or whatever. What are the key things, I guess, the foundation of multiple? So you have relationships and marriage. What is consistent with both of those? What is the foundation that works, those keys that make them work, that are in both of those relationships?
Sure. I would say first, I think the reason that we need to talk about relationships is because we're built for human connection. Right. I mean, that's undeniable. If you go all the way back to Genesis, if you're talking about from a biblical perspective, it's God made Adam in his image, and then saw that it wasn't good that man would be alone, and made a woman. So we're built for this type of relationship,
exactly.
And so I think that's what that drive is in us innately. Where we might get off is, I feel like, if you were asking from a marriage and a dating perspective, what makes each of those successful, I would say 2 maturing people.
Yes.
Maturing people, because I think that
that.
some people, you jump into relationships and you're not mature enough,
right?
And that person is also not mature enough, or growing, or maybe it's one or the other. Maybe you're very immature and someone is attracted to you in that way, and so you get into these relationships, and we have a tendency to really rely on that other person to maybe fill some of those gaps in our life, and really that's not reality. In some level, in a relationship, especially when you get into marriage, some will have strengths and some will have weaknesses that you help one another in. But I think our job, first and foremost, is to become the best version of us that we can be, then step into those relationships with our deficiencies and find someone else that's doing the same thing, growing, maturing, and then it's you don't end up with some of the pettiness, I feel like, that happens in a lot of relationships when you're dating and growing up, if that makes sense.
No, absolutely. And I've been in my, I guess, fair share of relationships, especially when you get a chance to reflect on them. So after they've failed, then you get to look back. What caused these relationships to fail? And I found that a lot of times, like you mentioned, I was putting a lot of dependency on this person. And I don't know how to explain it. It was one of those, you felt like you were just invested in the relationship, but the reality is you were almost obsessed with it. And you, in a way, and I'm not saying everybody does this, this was something, I guess, that I felt like, if I look back, this is where it was. It's almost like I was replacing a position that God was supposed to hold and putting her there. And it was, in my mind, I was justifying that I was just trying to love her like Christ would, this and that. But I mean, if you looked at some of the things that happened within the relationship, you'd realize that's not the case. So really, it kind of became an obsessive nature, which can lead to being controlling. So you may find that, ladies out there, if you're in a relationship and your boyfriend is controlling, or whoever you're with, he may have a real dependency on you, know? And the first thing I would say, or at least it's a popular Will Smith quote, I guess he was talking about his wife. He's not, her happiness does not depend on him. You have to have your own happiness. So that's kind of like a key thing. If someone's depending on you, this and that, I would almost say initially, at the risk of sounding controversial, maybe step away from the relationship and allow that person or allow yourself to really kind of develop that. This comes back to the search for significance and, you know, you're called to purpose, but really just find themselves, you know, like you need to learn to be happy without somebody.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do because our natural desire, like you said, and I mean, it was the first thing God said wasn't good. You want somebody.
Yeah.
You want somebody, and that's okay. But you have to learn to be basically rooted and founded in Christ and just realizing that you don't need them.
Yeah.
You might want them, but you don't need them.
Yeah. Yeah, that person can't be your answer.
Right.
Because that they're going to fail. We're human beings. We all have our own issues and quirks in our personality and things like that. And so they can't be that eggs all in one basket type deal, because you'll be disappointed and then you'll continue to be disappointed. And you also can't look at somebody, you know, sometimes you can see somebody who is, you know, better in a certain area than you and think, if I can just be in a relationship with them, then you know, we'll grow together. That's not necessarily true. If you don't have that drive in and of yourself to grow and to develop, that doesn't just come with being in a relationship, you know. And so it's the other way around too. You know, if you know, that the whole idea of like missionary dating that you hear about, like when you're growing up, of like, man, I'll just date them and like they'll get saved and they'll love God just as much as I do. Maybe once in a blue moon that happens.
It's a lot more rare than people realize.
A lot more rare than people realize. And it's just like, why not find somebody that's already developing and heading in that same direction as you, and then, you know, pursue that relationship with them as well, instead of you get two very broken people trying to fix one another in a relationship. It's like, I'm broken enough in and of myself, and so without that relationship with God, I'm an even more broken person. What am I going to bring into a relationship really that's going to help move this thing forward into something that's productive?
Yeah, you're pretty much just going to bring baggage at that point.
Which we all do at some level, and so it's like, why not do that maintenance on yourself and allow God to do that on the inside of you?
Limit it, you know? And that's, okay, so let me ask you this. I'm going to ask you another question now. You got married at 24, is that correct?
Yeah,
okay,
pretty young.
You got married at 24. I'm still single at 24. What would you say to people who are living in that comparison? You know, like, for example, a lot of people might look at themselves as early as, you know, anywhere between 18 to 20, like, why ain't I married yet? You know, like, life's not going the way I want it to, or even to 24. But then you realize, like, I mean, you look at some statistics that say, you know, after the age of 28 is when most successful marriages happen.
And a lot more people in our generation are waiting too. And under.
So what would you say to those people that, you know, are really asking God, you know, begging for it almost in a way, like, God, prepare this person for me, prepare me for them. And it's like, it's almost like the answer is not happening. You know, so it just seems like, is God really listening? Is there actually somebody out there for me? Like, what would you say to somebody that has that mental state?
I would say it's good. Like, some of the best things you have to wait for. Like, when I jump back and I look at my relationships before Jerusha, my wife, and I got married, if you would have asked me at the time, I could have seen marrying probably the last 3 before Jerusha. Totally could have seen marrying them. And now, knowing what I know, going through what I went through, those relationships trailing off, you know, really rekindling a friendship with Jerusha that later turned into a relationship again, because we grew up together, which is kind of a unique part of our story, was like, now looking back, every one of those would have been wrong. But where I was at maturity-wise at the time, I would have told you 100% that marrying them would have been the right thing to do. And I had a tendency to do that anyway. Just my personality, I get attached really easily.
I would have said that in all my relationships, but go ahead.
Exactly. And it's like, I get attached easy. When it's like my personality and kind of my gifting and the way God created me is like, when I'm with you for the long haul. You know, a lot of my relationships are lifelong, you know, relationships. Loyalty. And there's just like a loyalty element that comes in with my personality. And so at the time, all of those seemed right. But they weren't. And so
got a cough.
Easy now. So I would say, man, just patient. Keep doing that day in and day out development of yourself. walk alongside with God. I think the longer that you wait too, as you're maturing, because you're an idiot when you're 16.
Yeah.
Like you just are, especially guys. We're dumb when we're 16 years old. But as our brain continues to develop and we continue to just develop in life, I think that there's something to be said about through those really formative years, learning how to rely on God for stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Learning how to work on ourselves and work on purity and things like that, so that we're coming into a relationship being the type of men that lead their families well.
Yeah.
That doesn't just happen. I feel like that's intentional to become that type of man. And so I would say if you're in that age group, just keep day in, day out, keep developing, keep praying, keep your eyes open. I'm also not one of the guys of the mindset of like, God has absolutely one single individual for you to marry and that's it, because then I always think of like, what if the wrong person marries the wrong person, then doesn't that mess it up for everybody?
Right.
Exponentially. But I think that God does have a plan for your life, and I think there is a Bible talks about like good, acceptable, and perfect will of God. I feel like there's levels, and so why not hold out for that perfect will of God?
Yeah.
Who that person is, what it looks like to have a relationship that truly is a partnership.
Yeah.
And not just a dating relationship. I think those type of things come with time and come with maturity.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, like, that's one of the things I feel like in a lot of ways, how do I explain it? It's not that I would disagree, but like my challenge is that like believing that there's not like a specific someone out there for you. Like, it's kind of like, I don't want to say like predestined or anything like that, but almost like, in a way, like what you're saying, I feel like, you can step out of the will of God, and you can marry whoever you want. But at the same point, like, there is somebody out there that's like designed for you, that if you're living in the will of God, that's who you'll end up with.
Yeah. And I think there is. I think that's part of that perfect will of God.
Right.
But, my whole point is like, well, what if somebody marries that person? Am I just now out of luck? Well, no, I think there's ways around it, and just being led by God and finding somebody who loves him as well,
right.
and that'll be a match. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, yeah.
I just think there's a lot of pressure sometimes of like that movie romance thing that's really unhealthy. And sometimes it's right under your nose.
No, I'll agree with that. I think a lot of people don't realize, too, like, you can feel a lot of times like, that this person's like the one or whatever, this and that. But I mean, like, if it doesn't work out, then maybe it's not. I mean, if you're living in the will of God and it doesn't work out, there's a reason.
Absolutely.
So maybe God's the one that stepped in and pulled you out of that, which is likely, especially if you're living in the will of God at that point.
Right.
So
I would say one more thing as well would be, it's like, I'm trying to word this in in a good way. It's like when you're in a relationship, like you said, that maybe doesn't work out from the will of God. I think one thing is we need to quit treating all relationships that are dating relationships like they're marriage relationships. There's a difference. A difference. As in a marriage relationship, you're committed to work on that and work on yourself. And so many times I think people jump into these things so hot and heavy, and they begin to treat dating relationships as if they're already married. And I think there's a danger in that, because then there's no separation from that dating transitioning into marriage, which I feel like is really like scripturally and spiritually like a ceremony of like going from like a boy into a man that leads a family. And so if you begin treating these so seriously, your dating relationships, like you're married, I think it's just that's so much pressure. It's like God hasn't given you the grace to be over here yet, because you're not over here into marriage yet. And when you step over into that, there'll be grace to do it and to lead well. But over here, it's still a dating relationship. So understand that it should be fun. It should be exciting. There shouldn't be nearly as much pressure. Now, if you see this going long term, sure, begin to transition that thing into more serious. But I feel like we carry a lot of weight in dating relationships.
You put a lot of commitment in early, and then it's almost like it scares most people, And I understand, like, women naturally kind of are already, like, they have that loyalty factor, kind of that commitment. So it's not that it scares men away. That's not what it's doing. But as much as it's like maybe they're not ready for that phase, and that's just something they kind of realize. And then it's like, well, he can't commit. And a lot of times I'll agree with him, I mean, especially in today's culture, you see cheating so rampant and this and that. So in that sense, yes. But I'm saying, like, you don't have to be with them constantly, this and that, these other things or whatever, live in that type of thing, which I have been extremely guilty of in past relationships.
Yeah.
Pretty much all my exes will tell you all the negatives about me way before they'd ever start with a positive. But I think what it comes down to, like, for me is I was like, if you had to look at a relationship and kind of judge, like, what are the consistencies that make them fail?
Right.
A lot of times I've realized that there's a couple key factors that play into it. Manipulation, being controlling, and issues that tend to fall back on parents, and I want to be like a little, I guess on the more controversial side, even though I would almost just say this to anybody up front that's like really close to me, but I'm kind of weary about saying it to people that are kind of leaning on that edge. But you might find that if you're, if you had a parent that wasn't around all the time, this and that, like you're missing something you were supposed to get, while growing up. So you'll find that most women, if they struggle in something, probably have daddy issues, and then if men have mommy issues or whatever, they tend to like bounce around quickly. You know what I mean? Like they can't really commit to anything because they don't want to be hurt again.
Right.
So it's like, they'll beat it to the punch, if that makes sense.
Sure.
So, but it's like a lot of times if a relationship is failing, look for one to see if your personalities line up. So it's like, is there a way, like, do these intermingle naturally? You know what I mean? So a lot of times you'll find opposites attract, or almost exactly the same personalities tend to work together. But like, look at that first. If you're like, okay, if you've already convinced yourself that works, then look deeper than that. So like, what are the issues? Are you being controlling, or where is that happening? Is there manipulation in there? And then try to identify like where that's coming from. And like I said, like we mentioned earlier, a lot of times there's healing that's needed.
Right.
So, like, I really hate to say it, but I feel like every sermon I've ever watched that talks about relationships, a lot of times they're like, take a year off. Like, take a year where, like, if you are damaging to someone or you are damaged or whatever,
right,
take a year off and just focus on God. And it sounds awful. Honestly, I remember I had a mentor in Louisville once tell me that, and I was just like, you're a nut. Like,
sounds stupid.
Yeah. I was like, I mean, if a pretty girl comes up and, she's like, I was like, nah, like, that's not how that works. But I mean, like, seriously, I mean, and it's the common theme of these sermons and stuff that I'm watching, like, then maybe do that. Another thing that I think is dangerous about relationships today is that the initial reason that people get in relationships is based on a physical attraction.
Right away.
And that needs to be, and it doesn't, like, you need to be attracted to that person. But it needs to be like the last thing that you're looking at. Like, when you're building up to a relationship, it should not start with, okay, I'm physically attracted to this person. Like, the first thing you're looking at is, are we compatible? As in, can we be friends? Are we naturally friends? This and that. And you develop that up. Like, it's kind of like going in, it's like having a triangle, so the foundation, like, are they godly, this and that, that kind of thing. And then, can you be friends? How's their family life, this and that, or whatever. And it gets up to that last little piece that's, a physical attraction.
Right.
Well, if you have a pyramid setting up normal, it's going to stand. But if you put it on its tip, it's just going to tumble. It's going to fall over.
Right.
So you have to first find that Christian foundation. I know we talked about this in the Soul Ties episode. Just kind of recapping on that. You want to find somebody that's equally yoked.
Yep.
So I feel like I'm just like throwing a bunch of points out there. If you're confused, I apologize. But you want to find somebody that's equally yoked. That's where you want to start. So go to church. And I had a buddy that keeps asking me, he's like, why can't I, find a girl or whatever, this and that. And I'm just like, you're looking in the wrong areas. And he's like, what do you mean? Like, I go out to the bars and stuff on the weekend, this and that. And I'm like,
well,
like, who you talk? Yeah. And it's just like, he's like, well, what do you do? And I was like, well, you're asking the wrong guy, because I was like, I needed to take my own advice here or whatever. But that's kind of been like where my foundation has changed, especially in this last year of healing or whatever, where I'm just like, I'm at church. Like, it's got to be somebody that's like dedicated there, because I don't need somebody holding me back or distracting me. The main important thing in your life is going to be your foundation of Christ. And you both have to be good at it.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you'll get lost in it. And it doesn't mean you can't have a bad day. That's what the other person's there for, that balance. But that needs to be the first thing.
It's got to be, because what you'll find is when you step into marriage, you'll have times when everything else, the physical attraction part, the friendship part, will be challenged.
Yeah.
But like, if you don't have that, if you have that foundation of Christ, you're at least there together.
Yeah.
Because I mean, one of the things I always encourage people, if you're looking at a relationship and wondering if you can marry that person or would want to marry and be in a relationship with that person, like, picture like in the beginning romantic stage, like butterflies in your stomach stage of the relationship, those little quirky things that you considered cute. Now imagine living with that every single day of your life. Like, we're all annoying in some way.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? And so you have to like look at the bigger picture of what it's like. And if you don't have some kind of foundation like that, which I believe is a foundation in Christ together, all that other stuff, you'll have days that your friendship is challenged.
Yeah.
Your partnership is challenged. Your attraction to one another in that way is challenged. And like, if you don't have a foundation, it's like no wonder why these things continue to crumble. Because as time goes on, the things that were cute, in the middle of a fight become very annoying.
Yeah.
And things like that. And it's like, if you don't have some starting ground with Christ, then, no wonder 50% inside and outside of the church marriages fail, which is like even higher now statistically, you know.
Well, let's ask this then, because, so we obviously have kind of an idea of marriage. A lot of people can read a lot of that in Scripture, but it seems like, talking about regular relationships, kind of developing up to a marriage isn't necessarily, I don't feel like it's covered a lot in Scripture. You know what I mean? So, like, especially in today's world, it seems like it's very confused. Mm-hmm. I, for one, could have taken a lot of notes just like on figuring out how to do it. But it's like, okay, so let me ask you this. When it comes to, and I'm going to ask some controversial questions maybe you might have the answers to. You may not, and that's okay, But like, for example, this would be a controversial question. What is an appropriate boundary for friendships of the opposite sex? If let's say you and Jerusha are together, what is an appropriate level of a friendship with you and another woman?
Yeah, I think if you're in a committed relationship, I think that's something that you discuss together.
Yeah.
And then you write those down or you talk about them so that you're both very clear.
Yeah.
Because I think it's going to be a little bit different with each person. For me, I'm very protective of that myself. As a man, I understand how I'm wired. I understand how my mind works. And so I am extra protective of that on myself. So I think you got to know yourself first.
Yep.
Then I would say have that discussion with your significant other.
Yeah.
And then you guys come up with what those boundaries and what those lines are. And then I feel like if there are situations where you're uncomfortable, then you know that you have to have open communication about why that thing was uncomfortable to you. And then it's a give and take. It's like, hey, this friendship seems okay. This one feels a little weird to me when I'm around it. Okay, well, there really is nothing there. Yeah, and I understand that. I'm just letting you know how I feel. And then, because this whole thing with relationships, and especially if it gets to that point where you step into marriage, it's like, it's always a give and take. It's a sacrifice of yourself for that other person. And so I think to start that in a dating relationship is important. Open communication, setting boundaries, and then having the freedom to say to one another when something doesn't seem or feel right to you.
Right. And I think that's huge too. And a big problem I feel like is that you get in a relationship now. In today's culture, it seems this is pretty common. You'll get in a relationship, people will naturally know. Jealousy, we know jealousy is not a good thing, but in the same point, like, look at some of these situations on why people are jealous.
Right.
A lot of times there are relationships or friendships that are kind of like, okay, it's like kind of crossing the line. It's like, this is, he's basically me. Mm-hmm. Just he doesn't have the title. Like, that's a problem. And I'm okay with saying that, and I'll tell you straight up if we're dating if it bothers me.
Right.
Because this is how I see it. I'm like, to me personally, I'm like, if we can't make an agreement on what proper boundaries are, for one, I will never ask you to do anything I won't do. It won't happen.
Sure.
I was like, and granted in the past, and I'll admit this, like I've been on that controlling end where it was kind of like, okay, like let's take it to the extreme. So I know like where that error is.
Right.
But like there is certain boundaries, especially what I know is healthy now, learning through a lot of these sermon series and stuff. You can watch Michael Todd, you can watch Jeremy Foster, on their relationship goals and this other stuff. But like, there's those boundaries there, and I'll tell you straight up if it bothers me. And if you and I don't agree to that point, whoever I'm dating, if we don't agree on it, then I'm basically going to determine that you have selected that priority. So to me, I personally step away from it.
Yeah.
And that's because I'm not going to put myself through a mental stress. And, I know what I consider healthy and what I would ask out of that. There's somebody out there with the same mentality. You'll find it. It's like, you don't want to be too extreme, like I'm saying, but like, don't settle for anything, especially, like, don't sacrifice your mental health, because that'll in turn affect your physical health, all this other stuff. Like, just find what you're looking for, write it down so you know it before you're in a relationship, because when you get in a relationship and now you love somebody and you're like, well, here's the boundary, it's like, it can be a little extreme. So have it written down, like, think rationally. Yeah. Have it written down, that way it can be discussed beforehand.
Yep, definitely. And I would say, have grace with one another, because, women and men think very differently.
100%.
And so understanding that and having that open communication side of it. And then I would say, I would really only get to that point when the relationship begins to get serious. That's when you have these discussions, because I feel like if you do it too fast, you do away with the fun section.
Yeah. It's already a job.
When you first get in a relationship, there's so much fun involved with it. It's someone new. It's like the conversation is really, it's just like so much of it should be fun.
Yeah.
And so, like, if you're on a first date and you're like, hey, let's talk boundaries with other dudes, like, probably not gonna fly right. You know what I mean? And so I would say, when you step into that seriousness is where you start to bring those things up.
I'm done. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just because, I feel like if you're desperate to be in a serious relationship, it's easy to get over into that kind of stuff too early. At least it was for me. And like, you gotta let it be fun.
Oh, that's great. Oh, but anyways, I don't even know what else to cover anymore. No, but in relationships, it's like you're saying, I think the big thing to realize is that a lot of it is compromise. It's going to be a lot of compromise. Yeah, it's going to be fun at first, and, it's exciting to get to learn somebody and, to go on those first dates, and all that stuff's exciting, but eventually it's going to plateau. It's going to hit that point. So then you're going to get to where, like, now you're compromising. And you have to be okay with that. When you genuinely love somebody, these are the things you'll naturally do. Yeah. And sometimes you might have to force yourself to do it. You know what I'm saying? At like times, maybe the guys want to go out, and watch the football game or something, but you already promised your wife earlier that week that you were gonna watch a movie with her that night or whatever, blah blah blah, etc. That's a compromise. That's one of those things. And I think another thing, like when it comes to like dating and marriages, don't ever stop dating. Yeah. Because when you're not like chasing each other constantly, that's just one of the big things. There's another book I want to recommend too, actually, I'm thinking about. It's called Love and Respect. Have you read that book?
Have not. I don't think so.
So Love and Respect talks about how it's kind of like the biblical principle of a successful marriage. Naturally, and this is how it is. We talk about it. Men are to love their wives. Wives should respect their husbands. And it's not like a should, it's like you must. So, and I think that's like where we kind of cross lines. Like, you'll get respect where you earn it. It's like, this isn't the husband. This is the husband and wife category I'm talking here. But I'm like, it's good practices to have, especially when, when you're loving somebody. That's crucial. So a lot of people tend to forget when it's like you read scripture that's like, submit, wives submit to your husbands. It's like men will use that in a manipulation term. And they're not even following up with like the very next part that's literally like, and husbands love your wives.
As Christ loved the church and he gave his life for her. So literally, love her in such a way that you would die for her. That's like above that respect level. Like so many people, like they look at it like this, but really the responsibility and the call of a man is way more intense.
Well, here's what's dangerous, I think, is another thing. Like we read, when we read submit, when they hear that, suddenly this red flag goes up. This is not if your husband tells you, hey, go grab me a beer out the fridge, that you got to do it every time. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, I think the way I explained it on a Facebook post not too long ago was that like submitting is almost like being subjected to having a shared mind, almost like an equal, you know what I mean? Like to being understanding and kind of like realizing that two conflicted minds will create a divided house and that will fall. So somebody has to lead. That's just how it is. There's nothing in life that any system that works anywhere that there's not technically a leader.
Well, and I explain it like this. It's like you are truly partners in a relationship,
Yes.
and you're side by side
Of equal value.
of equal value. You know, the New Testament says there's no Jew or Gentile or male or female or black and white in God's kingdom. He just sees you as a child of God, you know.
Yeah.
And so you are side by side in that relationship.
Absolutely.
But I believe that God graces men when you step into that husband role, that he will give you the grace to lead your family if you
Yeah.
rely on him to do so.
Exactly.
And so I think, you know, that it's not like this subservient thing.
Right.
It's just that God has called men and husbands to lead and protect and to provide for their families. And a lot of women do part of that providing and fill
Yeah.
that role at times, and like that's okay.
Yeah.
But understanding, that it is that side by side type thing.
Exactly. So I mean, and it's like a dangerous ground. People read that and they use that as like, oh, see, well, it's a misogynistic or whatever
Right.
you want to say type of book. It's like, no, well, for one, you got to go back and look at the Greek and the Hebrew text, like what that word means, you know.
Right.
So it was translated into English as submit, but the way that it's being used is not in the way that most of us tend to think when we hear the word submit. It's just, you know, it's kind of a different, I don't even know how to explain it. It's just something
Right.
you have to go back and look. You have to do your own research at that point. Sorry, we only got so much time. But so I mean, like a lot of it is just when you're in a relationship, I think the big key, if we're kind of like wrapping up here and kind of like saying what the points are, be working on yourself.
Yeah, always.
When looking for somebody, the first place you want to look is, you know, with the foundation of Christ. You know, you want that biblical foundation, not somebody that's coming to church because you're going, that's going to
Right.
church without you consistently.
Right, because relationships are hard enough without that.
Yeah.
You add that element of foundation with Christ, and I mean, it's just different. It
Yeah.
gives you a different advantage if you truly rely on it. You know, the church divorce statistics are just as much as outside of the church, but I think that it does give you advantage if you truly do rely on that foundation of Christ.
You know, so like what did we already say? You know, developing yourself,
Yep.
Having that foundation of Christ, being aware that you have baggage, you know, and that if you carry that in, that is, you know, like what are you carrying in, and can you get rid of it? Can you heal from
Right.
it before you do that?
Right.
Don't be scared to take a year off, you know, really just kind of rely on God. You'd be surprised at how well that works. Don't mean you're not going to have nights where you feel lonely,
Right.
but
right.
you
But
know, like
yeah. And I think that's where godly fellowship and friendships and stuff, you know, come in as well, you know, but don't rush it.
right.
So many people rush it. I had a tendency to rush it,
Right.
and it's like just allow it to be fun when it's supposed to be fun. I would say be healthy about boundaries for yourself
Yeah.
as well, not
another one.
jumping in too serious into a
Right.
relationship right off the bat. I'm talking mentally, physically, especially like you know, don't get into that too fast,
Yeah.
because then you're treating a relationship that isn't marriage as if it is marriage.
Yeah.
And then the grace to do well in those environments isn't there yet, because
Yeah.
that union hasn't happened
Yeah.
right before God.
And I'd say you'd want to grow to that. You know what I'm saying? So
Definitely.
it's like, yeah, those first, especially the first couple months, probably just like lay chilly. Like,
Right,
you know,
right.
just, yeah, a lot of things might upset you, whatever. You can address those, but at the same point, like, how severe is it? You know, like,
Right.
you know, real, like, again, you have to sit rationally,
Right.
especially with someone new.
Yeah,
But
yep. And when you grow into that stuff, I mean, you get into a serious relationship and then the marriage, like it can be really fun.
Yeah.
George and I have a ton of fun.
Yeah.
You know, we have, you know, struggles, and it does change from that like loving feeling to a choice to love that
Yeah.
person. Like
Yeah.
that transition happens in
Yeah.
all relationships, where it's like that really butterfly
Yeah.
type thing when it first starts, to then becoming a choice to love them daily.
Yeah.
And so you can rush that. Like, don't rush into that. But then when that does happen, when you get to that point in the relationship, it can be really, really, really fun
Yeah.
to do. To lock down and be like, listen, we're doing this together forever. Stuck with me.
Yeah.
Like, let's have fun in this. Make it fun. Continue dating one another, like you said. Set goals together. Like, I wouldn't trade any of my dating days at all for the time that we have now, George and I, to be able to set goals. We started a business together. All of this crazy,
Right.
crazy cool stuff that's happened in the 6 years that we've been married. And it's just like, it doesn't have to, the fun and the romance and all that stuff doesn't have to end
Right.
away.
Another thing I would add as a point here is that if you get out of a relationship, and it's for whatever probably toxic reason, it's like realize that most of the time leopards don't change their spots. So like if it didn't work the first time, probably not going to work the second. And I'm not saying that's in every case, you know, but I mean there are factors that come into knowing that somebody's actually changed. It's not because somebody showed up at your doorstep, now they're crying and brought you a box of Reese cups. It's literally like you have to see, okay, have they turned to Christ, you know, and allowed that to happen? Is that now like a major factor? Have they changed their circle of influence? You know, whatever factors that have led into them being who they are. Right. So if nothing in their environment has changed, including people or whatever, they probably haven't changed. And you have to be very cautious with manipulation at that point.
Sure.
Because a lot of people are like, well, I think he means it this time. He probably does sincerely mean that he's sorry.
Right.
But he hasn't changed who he is, you know, and he might be able to hold up this mask or whatever because he was afraid to lose you.
Yeah.
And this is vice versa too. Women can do the same thing. Just like you have to be very aware. So not necessarily keep your guard up if you're going to go back for seconds, you know what I'm saying? But like you definitely kind of do want to do that. You know? So it's like just be very aware. And especially in the case of soul ties, because now you're a lot more vulnerable. You know, it's so easy to get right back into
the
where you left off.
comfortability and familiarity that can come with those type of past relationships that might not be a good familiarity.
Right, exactly.
You got to watch out for that type of stuff.
Well, is there anything else you want to add?
That's good, man. I think that it's good when you find a healthy relationship.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't know what that looks like until you have a healthy relationship. And then you look back and you're like, oh my
all those are
gosh,
toxic.
the dragging along and the like, you know, listening to emo music after I break up, like all that stuff, like it's not God's best. And so I would say continue to become that person like we talked about, and then seek out and maybe even write down, study scripture, talk to friends, talk to parents, talk to people that are in successful relationships, and write down what you would like to see in a healthy relationship in your life. Like have a goal like you would for anything else, for a career, whatever. Have a goal for what that looks like for you, because once you experience that, it's way, way, way different than the dating and other people, especially that I, dated and stuff growing up. Exactly. It's like a completely different ball game.
Exactly. Well, for all of my exes out there that are watching, I would just like to apologize for who I was while we were together. I know I had my toxic traits, and I know you're probably not going to apologize either. Whatever. I'm just kidding. Y'all were perfect. But anyways, no, I mean, that's all I got to say, really, outside of that. You got anything else you want to add?
No, it's good. And, for those that are maybe stepping in for marriage or getting ready to, because I imagine with our age group, there's probably some, is like, have fun with it. Yeah. Have a lot of grace with each other, like learning how to live with somebody. And we're all selfish pretty much by nature. And so learning to do that with one another, it takes a little bit of time, and just have grace. Have a lot of fun, set some goals, go out and kick some butt, honor God, and love each other.
Well, it feels like every time you speak, I get another point, too. Another big thing is mentorship in that. Find somebody that's doing it right, that has been doing it longer than you.
Yep.
So when you have that and you're following that, they can give you these tips and other things like that. It is okay and good to have almost therapy, like marriage therapy and relational therapy type of sessions. Like it is good to have those. You're not crazy for getting them. I promise it's going to be in your benefit.
And I would even say pre-marriage counseling right before you get married. Find somebody, a church or something that does pre-marriage type counseling. Jerusha and I did that, and it was some of the most eye-opening stuff. And like now that I look back on those sessions and some of the stuff that we've had to deal with and work through on a relationship level, they were dead on when we went through pre-marriage counseling. Like, this is how your background was growing up. This is how hers was. This is kind of the baggage that you're bringing in. This is your tendencies and your personality. This is hers. These are some areas that you guys might butt heads on. And they were right in those areas. So it's good to get perspective outside of you, people that are smarter than you and better than you at what you're trying to accomplish.
Absolutely. Well, we want to thank you for watching. It's episode 13.
Already.
Don't forget, you got to snag the merch because we're doing a lot of really big things with that. I'm going to be talking with Cody about some of these ideas that Anna has kind of dropped up. She's got these drawn up. She wrote them down, sent them to me immediately after we had a phone call, so that's really exciting. But it's like through your financial investment into these things that we're able to do that. So your help is what is helping sow things into the kingdom. So we're really excited for that. It also helps get the word of the podcast out. If we also offer the option of donating directly to those events or whatever, these things that we kind of decide, all right, what do we want to do here? but that's also an option. So you don't have to have the merch if you don't want it, but the support's been rapid. It's been awesome. We got the hats, we got the tumblers, we got the shirts, we got the jackets, we got the hoodies. I mean, you name it. There's anything with a giant LF symbol we have. So
right.
At that point, we just want to thank you for watching and tuning in. Y'all are the biggest blessings in the world. You don't even realize how much we appreciate each comment, like, share. All that stuff is really vital to us. I always feel like I'm sending another thank you message after I sent 20 to people that get the shirts and stuff like that. So it's super awesome. But yeah, that's it for this episode. That's really all I got to say.
Awesome.
So,
thanks, guys.
Thanks,
Continue
guys.
to grow, work on yourself, and have fun.
Absolutely.
Have fun.
We appreciate you. Thank you. God bless. Hey guys, like we said, make sure you hit that subscribe button. I know it's on there. I threw it somewhere on this page. I don't know where it is. You can obviously see that there's links to the other videos. I don't know where I put them.
That
somewhere on here,
maybe.
Hoping that we'll figure it out. If I have to mirror it, I'll mirror it. We'll do something like that. But just click one of these videos. I mean, it's not hard. Whatever. Hit the like button. Subscribe.
It's not illegal to listen to more than one at a time.
That's what I'm saying. If you want to, play them fast. Whatever you got to do, just get it going. Yeah.
Play them while your kids sleep.
Dude. Boom.